Hello.
Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
After this, I'm going rollerblading with 3 girls that I've helped raise. That they're 6 years old, 2 twins, and their younger sibling, and we're all going to rollerblade together. So
That's
I'm very excited.
Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it. Yeah, mine is in the other room doing a mix of schoolwork and then I'm sure and slime. Slime is very big in this
slime
house.
is so popular.
Slime. Yes, and then we'll go out later today after work. We'll go out or hang out in
I
the
think
park for a little
most adults would benefit from slime play.
Hi, welcome to the Curious Fox podcast. This podcast is for those who challenge the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla, and in this episode, we're talking with the dynamic and insightful Jessie Fresh about how to develop a language and deeper understanding for our sexual pleasure. Jessie's a certified sex and relationship coach who helps women and couples create deep, intimate connections so that they can experience mind-blowing sexual pleasure that they so deeply crave. Using a unique technique to help her clients understand their deep sexual desires, she coaches them to experience intimacy and closeness where there are no limits on time, space, and love. She provides tools, techniques, and skills that lead to sexual empowerment, which ultimately manifests into confidence in all areas of her client's life. And like the Curious Fox team, Jessie's on a mission to end the unnecessary suffering that too many people endure because of the shame and guilt that they feel about sex. We are so happy to be speaking to her today.
Hi, Jessie.
Hello. Oh my gosh. I could listen to both of you talk for a long time.
Thank you for being here. We love talking about pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah.
Particularly now. I mean, we started this conversation before the podcast talking about the civil unrest that is happening, the emotional unrest that is happening, all of the things that are happening just in this kind of global moment, and how there can be some escape in really looking at joy and finding moments of pleasure and digging into who we are and exploring that. And so Effy and I constantly try to do that in our work and with our clients. And I'm really excited to learn from you some more techniques and tools around how to lean into and understand my pleasure.
Yeah. And before we get there, I'm really curious, Jessie, how did you get into this business?
Yeah. Well, I looked up one day how to female ejaculate. And that was on YouTube, I think 10 years ago, right as YouTube was starting. And I found a mentor. And it was the first time that I had ever found information about pleasure that was positive. And I actually fell into that person's YouTube hole for like a good 5 hours and then told every single person I knew. And that's what stemmed this curiosity around pleasure and my pleasure and how I could put it in my own hands. Literally. And that just opened up doors. And I ended up following that person. That is the mentor that I followed, Jaya Ma, who is a somatic sexologist that I've followed for many years. And after she had found the Erotic Blueprints, at that point, I was in the first functioning, healthy relationship of my adult life. I had a history of being highly codependent and picking the total hunks that treated me like shit. And I was in a relationship where I finally was attracted to the person that really treated me really well. We had sex that sometimes would be awesome, sometimes would be great, and a lot of times would be like totally missing the mark. And so I felt really frustrated because I was like, wow, I found someone that treats me well, and now are we incompatible? Like, is toxicity the thing that I need in order for sex to be hot? And that's not something that I wanted to believe in. And so that's when I leaned into this information even more of like, okay, if we're not matching up and if we love each other greatly, then how do we find each other's match in terms of speaking about it? Because we ran into so many bumps of me feeling really rejected, both of us feeling rejected, then anger showing up, frustration, anything that intended to be a hot, sexy night that ended up in me like having my fist clenched in bed was a total fail in my mind. And when I run into failure, I tend to try and find the solution. So the erotic blueprints and leaning into pleasure was the beginning of that.
Wow.
Amazing.
And I love that you share that, because I do think that there is some myth and storytelling around the toxicity equals great sex, and that the partners that we have that we argue the most with and stuff, that that's like that passion then translates
passion.
into sexual intimacy, and that you may have to trade that for stability, that when you find someone where there is a healthy, loving rapport, that over time that will become stale and stagnant, and sex will be bad. And so I love the idea of first naming that, but then saying, actually, there are ways and strategies and tools and ways to play that feels fun. Because sometimes, we talk about this in terms of the work. When you're working on yourself in your relationship, it can feel like so much work. And so being able to find a practice that is work but play, I think is really interesting. I'm curious to find out more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of misunderstanding about passion. Like we think what we think passion is, and what it looks like, and how it affects our sex lives and our pleasure, which isn't they're not necessarily all sort of they're kind of intertwined, but not the same thing. I'm curious, why do you think pleasure is so important?
Pleasure is so important because it's what helps us live fully alive lives. It's what keeps us activated. It's what keeps us going. I know that when I live a life that's deprived of pleasure, my body aches. My mind is tortured. I am more achy in my body. I've had a mystery illness when I was younger that was created by me, I believe, from the amount of stress and burnout that I was creating for myself. And so that's the direct exposure that I've had to, like, okay, if you don't prioritize rest, happiness, balance in your life, then you're compromising your health, your stability, and your wellness. That's like the deeper end of it.
Sure. I think to an extent that pleasure, now we're talking about this, is making me, I'm realizing that there's definitely a school of thought that stigmatizes pleasure as well. And I don't mean just sexual pleasure, but just pleasure in life, that it is somehow indulgence, and it's somehow excess, it's sometimes extra, and it's selfish, and it's
Particularly female pleasure.
Right. Exactly. And if you're seeking your pleasure, you're a hedonist, and there's something wrong about that. Rather than kind of what I'm hearing you say is, it's like, no, it's your life force.
Every cell in your body is wired for pleasure, and we deny that often.
Yeah.
I like the term healthy hedonism.
Yes.
That's what I'm going for.
And part of what you said that's really important too is there becomes a disconnect with our bodies as a result of that. So what you described was that some of and I had this experience as a young person too, I had a lot of like stomach issues. We would go to doctor after doctor, nothing's wrong. Now, certainly understanding that was really a manifestation of anxiety, and understanding this disconnect between how we are feeling and how that's manifesting in our body, and how we can actually leverage our body to impact our feelings, and where we hold tension and all those types of things. And again, I think, and certainly this is broad for all folks with all gender identities, but I think those who are identified as women, or who identify and show up in the world as female, there's an extra set of pressure, societal pressure around our bodies and around legislating our pleasure. And so, to your point, being able to connect those things and be in ourselves and actually enjoy ourselves, harder sometimes, I think, than. So give me a sense of that. Like, what do you think is getting in the way of pleasure, of sex, of great sex?
Well, like you had just said, first of all, the relationship that we have with our body, which I have plenty of clients that are like, you want me to tell you what sensations I feel in my body? I don't know what you're talking about. So even cultivating that relationship with, like, what am I actually feeling, can be really difficult. That's something that I had to learn as a young adult. It's something that after that illness, to overcome that illness, I had to really listen. And so listening was part of that. Listening to what I'm feeling mentally, physically, emotionally, acknowledging it, because I was so used to completely denying my feelings, my thoughts, anything that was going on in my body. And I think that's something that in our culture we're taught to. Well, I grew up in Southern California, and definitely the mentality there is like, you need to work and keep up with the Joneses. And I'm sure in New York it's very similar, that you push aside your needs to like keep up. And therefore you're not listening to what your needs are or what your body needs, or it's not possible to keep up with that lifestyle and take care of yourself.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I keep up with the Joneses, or a desire to achieve, like be very achievement focused at any cost. And also I think, as women in the workplace, being all about your output, your productivity, your, and not necessarily embodying yourself, embodying embodying the body that you're in, embodying your sexuality. Those things are always seen to be either getting in the way or you manipulating the situation, right? That's in the workplace. So I think definitely culturally, there's a lot of things in the way, right? And I think also personally, I mean, I've definitely disconnected from. I had been very disconnected from my body due to just my own trauma. And I think when we talk about pleasure, we do have to kind of have a side conversation about pleasure, about trauma, because that's ultimately kind of, I find the root of what gets in the way is some sort of trauma. And I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my body until I reconnected. And it was like, oh, there's all this information that I've been ignoring, pretending it's like white noise that I don't understand. And then once you do that, once you get that body mind connection restored, and it's something that I still have to work on.
Of course.
I can easily disconnect, and it's kind of where my because my strongest, I believe, I hold on to a belief that my strongest muscle is my brain. So the more stress I'm under, the more things I need to get done, the more I retreat into my brain. And then therefore it reinforces that my brain is my strongest muscle, and I have to take a real, I have to make a real effort to like, no, you are more than your brain. You have to connect with your body. You need to connect with your feelings. You need to put all that information together and then make decisions.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah. No, it's a lifelong, it's a lifelong practice for sure.
Yeah, it's a discipline.
For sure.
And so we were talking a little bit about what gets in the way. I'm interested now in talking with you about tactics. Like, okay, so how do we increase it? How do we increase our own sexual pleasure? How do we do that in partnership or in relationship? I'm interested in, I'm like writing, let me get my notepad. Like, what are those? What do we do, Jessie?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing is that what I'm teaching in the Pleasure Mastery Workshop is the beginning, the foundational work to understanding your pleasure. And in that there's the 5 erotic blueprints. So that's a framework to understand basically your erotic sexual personality type. And each erotic personality type has very specific blocks that show up based on how you are wired in your nervous system for pleasure. So, for example, if your mind is overactive, there are certain things that you can do to lessen your mind chatter. So, if your blocks are that your mind is continually showing up, we need to focus on relaxation and the things that get you relaxed. So, if that means taking a 2-hour walk in nature before you have a sexy date with yourself, that's part of the foreplay. If part of your history involves trauma, and that is what blocks you, then we need to create the safety that allows you to feel like everything is taken care of. All of the agreements have been said. Everything has been negotiated and my body feels safe. If you are, I'm trying to think of other blocks. Like if you're orgasm driven, if you're like, we're going to have sex and we're going to orgasm, and that hijacks your experience because you're then feeling scripted or feeling like you're just going straight to the accelerator pedal. There's ways in which you can slow down, take in the rest of the experience through your senses. That takes a lot of discipline for the people that are orgasm hunters. And also just acknowledging before you even begin of like, okay, we have this much time. We live in like a time scarcity bubble. And when we can acknowledge like there's plenty of time, we can relax into this, we can explore, that can really help in terms of the orgasm hunting.
I'm curious. The wiring, the way that we're wired for pleasure, is this? This is pure nerdy curiosity. Is this like what we call like character? Is it a disposition, or is this something that develops as a part of through a set of experiences? Do you know?
It's certainly both. I know that for myself, I've been all 5 of the erotic blueprints since I've started this journey 7 years ago. So what has shown up for me is that I recognized where I was at in the moment when I first found it. And then as I experience more, as I lean into that pleasure more and give myself more of it, expansion happens. And then I pop into something new and a new experience. So it can be caused by traumatic experiences. It can be caused by hormonal experiences, emotional, physical, everything. So all of those things have influenced how I have shifted. Also,
Interesting.
for like a tangible example is that when I first began this journey, I was like, I just want caressing. That would really turn me on. Yes, I need the room to be perfect. That's what I need. And that's a specific blueprint. That's the sensual blueprint. They need to be turned on by having their senses ignited. And I said that because that's what I truly believed, but that's not what my body actually wanted. That's the script that I had taken on of what I thought women need. So I would ask my partner, like, give me that. That's what I need. Then I'll be turned on. And they're like, I'm giving you that and you're not getting turned on. You're actually getting like incredibly picky. You are like completely clenching in your body. You're not listening to your body. So what is that about? And I would get really frustrated because there was a disconnect. And then what I realized when I went to my coach training is they encountered the same thing. I said, I like caressing. I want the mood to be just right. And after about 10 minutes of these other coaches testing sensations on me, one of them threw down their clipboard and was like, put your fucking hands above your head right now. Don't you move. And my whole body had a very different experience. It lit up. I was giddy. I was squirmy. I was so excited. It was like, I don't know, like the first day of Christmas kind of feeling, but like that amount of excitement of just like joy. And that's when I realized, oh, I had been scripted in what I thought I needed. And now I'm exposed to like psychological kink and that's what turns me on. Okay. And then leaning into that and seeing what shows up from there. And that has just morphed and morphed and morphed, which is really beautiful because you can then have some kind of influence in your erotic expansion.
For sure. That's interesting because when we talk about this, when we have a workshop coming up, and we knew that we were going to host you on the podcast, so it becomes like the topic of conversation around the team, and also just because I talk about my work all the time for pleasure and maybe annoyance of all my friends. This is kind of all I talk about. So it was like people were just like, oh, what is this thing? Like, what is this? Blueprint, the erotic blueprints. And I've been shorthanding it by saying, everybody knows about the love languages. It's essentially the love languages, but for your erotic expression. And it's just finding out how it manifests and how it can be how it could be received and shown and shared. And just the thing that I always say about love languages to people as well, that it is that you can be multilingual. People are always like, I'm this. I'm like, great. And you can be other things too. You can either tap into that frequency or you can learn, and you can grow into, and ideally you get to a place where you can receive and show love in all the frequencies all the time in all the ways. I'm hearing a similar thing about the blueprints. So you were saying like you can start from that and you can explore and you can grow and you can learn and you can expose yourself and you can find yourself sort of flowing through all 5, right? There's 5 of them.
Yeah, one of them is all 5. And that's like the epic holy grail is the shapeshifter, where that is your multilingual. You can then speak every single blueprint. You can receive every blueprint and you want to explore it all. You want the variety, creativity. Yeah, you are the awesome person at the orgy because you can recognize everyone's needs and fulfill those, and you're able to play for hours.
Yeah.
So,
And
not to scare anyone.
No,
Yes.
I was not at all. I was like,
I was gonna say, Jackie, did you do the quiz? Because
No,
shapeshifter is what I got.
I was just going to
Yeah.
say, one of the things that we will definitely include in the show notes is the quiz so that people can find out. And then certainly if they want to know more, and we'll tell you more at the end, but Jessie will be joining us on June 8th, on June 10th, Wednesday, June 10th, so that we can explore this some further. But I wanted to touch base because in our last episode, we had a conversation with Angie Gunn around attachment styles. And similarly, we had the dialogue around that it's not your Myers-Briggs, it's not your star sign, that we can show up differently depending on our level of growth, depending on which partner we're with, again, this sounds really similar. And so I'm interested if that's been your experience with folks who have multiple partners, that they may show up with one particular blueprint type with one partner and show up in another dynamic with another partner. And so I'm interested in your observation there with yourself or with your clients.
Mm-hmm. It depends. Like there's some people that are very fixed where they feel like, no, I am this way and this is how I am regardless of what partner I'm with. But in my experience, I see the relationship phase that you're in. Like if you're in the honeymoon phase, all of your anticipation and longing and waiting is going to be bubbling, and therefore that might be fulfilling one of your blueprints. Like in new relationships, I'm really great at having the like strip me of my clothes and let's immediately get down to it, because there's all of that is fulfilled in terms of what I need of the anticipation. But once that phase has gone on, once the honeymoon phase is gone, that's when I still need connection, anticipation, the longing and waiting, and creating that when you have that at your fingertips is more difficult. It's a more mysterious because once that's gone, you're like, oh, but I lost the excitement. So that can be interesting in relationship phasing. And I think that, of course, everyone's chemistry brings out others' chemistry. So having partners with different blueprints can draw out what's longing to come out for you as well.
Can we dive into that a little bit? I'm interested in two things that you mentioned there. One is kind of an energetic or maybe stylistic mismatch. And that I think could exist either in the story that you described with yourself and your partner around that there was a mismatch, or just circumstantial. I know my partner and I the other day, I was like, let's be warm and cozy. And they were like, let's just do the damn thing. And like the energy, like we kept trying to slow down, speed up, and like we couldn't figure out like how to get on the same frequency. So I think that can happen. So I'm interested in talking about how to regulate the mismatch. And also to your point around relationship phases, it is a very sad and mournful day for me when when new relationship energy ends. Like I'm in my, that's my Christmas morning every day, is to have that level. And every partner I'm with is like, it's going to go away. Like, this has it. And I'm like, no, like, I'm holding on as long as it's possible. But when that phase ends and when that kind of energy and the excitement, all those chemicals go away, and how do we spice that up? So those are two things I'm interested in exploring with you, kind of the mismatch, and then how do we potentially spice things up? And I'm using air quotes when we've moved out of the beginning honeymoon period, new relationship energy phase.
I'm a strong believer that in NRE, and when someone tells me when I'm in a honeymoon phase and they're like, oh, you're just in a phase, I'm like, fuck off, because I want to live in it forever. Like, don't ruin my bubble. And if this is the only like Pfizer drug that I'm willing to back, is like if they give us a pill for NRE, because new relationship energy is something that I think is
I'm right behind you, Jessie.
Yeah, it's what makes life worth living in my mind, in relationship. So
let's bottle it. Let's bottle it and
let's
bottle it and give it out for free.
Tell me how. It's just like a little bit of serotonin, a little bit of dopamine, a lot of oxytocin, a lot of adrenaline, all of those things put together and just put it into a cocktail.
Yes.
Or a tincture, whatever. We can make a homeopathy NRE. Okay, so when there's mismatched desire, the great thing about the erotic blueprints is that first we practice showing up for ourselves. And by showing up for ourselves in our own needs and desires, it helps us build that resilience and become more fed. So if you were to look at like a resource spectrum of your sexuality, the way that I look at it is that when you're fed, you're like in a neutral place, kind of like when you're like, I think of this as being hangry. So when you're hungry, it's like you can eat a meal and you can go a couple of hours, but in a couple of hours, you're going to be hungry again. When you haven't been feeding yourself well for a while, you get hangry. And what shows up is the like anger, frustration, quick temper, those kinds of things that show up that you're like, oh, I didn't know that this was related to hanger or to hunger. And then on the other side, say that you're eating fully and having snacks and fully nutrient dense and everything, then you're going to feel like you can go for longer periods of time without nourishment because you're so full, like when you're on a keto diet or something. So I tried to look at sexual fulfillment in that way. So if you're looking at your fulfillment, how much are you showing up for yourself so that when you show up to a partner, you're able to then fall into a match a lot easier because you're not needing so much from them to get turned on. You're feeling more resourced, more relaxed, more turned on in life. So I guess that's the turn on spectrum. If I could reverse what I said, the turn on spectrum is like, how much are you doing to support your turn on in your life? So, like what I had said, it sounds like you needed some coziness and some like snuggly time and some kind of connection in that way. And because that's a need that you have to connect with your partner, maybe look in their eyes, feel the warmth of their skin, and just to really like breathe together. And that's a need that you have, and your partner is voicing another need of like, okay, I feel connected very quickly. Like, let's get this on and connect in a different way. And for them, that's a different kind of blueprint. That's the sexual blueprint where when they're like, let's get into like the genital touching and the body touching, and that's their need, is that they want to feel really validated by exploring the body and having their genitals explored and having that be their like, it's their water, food, nourishment on a basic level. And so say that if you were to voice like, hey, if you were to do the things that you needed, like if you were to be more snuggly in an off time, or to be like, I need more snuggles like 50% of the time in life to feel like rested, less anxious, and relaxed. And then therefore I can open up, then that would be really helpful. Another thing that you could do in that moment is that when your partner is like, no, let's just do this, is you can be like, okay, but can we snuggle for like another 10 minutes and I'll like start to meet your needs? Meaning like you'll meet my needs by snuggling a little bit longer and I'll meet your needs by beginning to like stroke your genitals. And that way it keeps them engaged. So the question, I'm circling back to the question. The question is like, how do we meet each other's needs when we're like missing the mark with each other? There's different ways that I'm going to teach you in the workshop of like how to meet each other's needs simultaneously, how to negotiate that so that you can show up and both get your needs met and then therefore feel fulfilled and opened up and ready to go when that happens.
Mm-hmm. You know what it made me think of, Jackie? You talking about us discussing this. One of the things, again, in I think it was Angie Young's workshop on the workshop, she talked about. She made a really interesting and important distinction about how your relational dynamics is separate from your sexual dynamics, and that, you know, do you remember the tree? She showed us a tree that was wrapped up by ivy versus a tree that was all like multi. Roots and connected to one another. So when I hear you say, when I hear you describe your experience and knowing a little bit about what's going on, it makes me wonder if your needs in that moment are relational needs or sexual needs.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful point. I was thinking the same thing. You're right.
Because I think in that moment you're trying to meet your relational needs through cuddling and connection. Absolutely. And not necessarily your sexual needs.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And I think now hearing kind of Jessie flesh that out, that became clear to me, that I think that experience that I'm talking about was in a moment where my partner and I were kind of in in conflict, trying to like it was like building safe space with each other still. Like there were some things that we were trying to navigate through. And I think for me it was a relational, I want to feel connected and leveraging sex in order to do that. And for my partner, I think it was trying to avoid the conflict and ignore it. And let's just use sex to do that. And I think we both came to the sexual table, if you will, with different intentions around what we needed because of the relational tension that we were experiencing. So I think that's completely fair, Effy. Yeah.
And I think
I look at them as both sexual. I look at that, like, even if you need snuggling and connection in a relational way, that's what's going to open the door for you to feel sexual and to feel relaxed. Your partner might be that blueprint that they need to get off in order to feel relaxed. So you're both trying to feel the connection and the relaxation, but one is driven in a very different way.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
It's like you need relaxation as foreplay. They need relaxation as like post-orgasm.
Sure.
But that's such a great point. Love that relational part.
But I have to sit with that. I think that's really true. And it's interesting to me because we had a conversation recently with Stella Harris regarding masturbation. And I was thinking about my masturbation journey separate than my sexual, like partner sex journey. And I think that I feel that what you just described around relaxation post-orgasm, if you will, as my masturbation strategy, but not necessarily my sexual strategy. And like, so does that mean, so certainly that exists within me, right? That exists within my blueprint type, if you will, but figuring out then how to leverage some of that in this space. And so that's interesting. Really interesting.
We also tend to self-pleasure in a very specific blueprint that's not necessarily our own. So because of either being in a hurry or having this script of that's what masturbation looks like, that most people, when I ask them like, oh, how do you self-pleasure? They'll go, oh, I take a toy out and I put it there. And then I say, oh, is that really like what your blueprint would really enjoy? And they're like, no. And then when I ask them, oh, what would that enjoy instead? And they're like, well, probably like 90 minutes in the bath. I'm speaking from my experience because I have that relationship with masturbation where I go, oh, I really want to feel pleasure. I don't even say like I want to get off. I want to feel pleasure. And so how do I do that? And there's a script that pops in that says, okay, you're going to get out the vibrator and you're going to put that there and you're going to have an orgasm real fast. And my body hates that. Like my body clams up and goes, no. And so that's been my relationship to masturbation, where I will avoid masturbation because I have this like sexual bully going on that's like, we're going to masturbate and we're going to like do it fast. When I actually get to listen to what my needs are, it's like, I'm going to go in the bath for a good 90 minutes so that I can relax. And then I'm going to like put on some music in my room and butter up my body with like cacao butter and stuff that smells like aphrodisiacs. And then I'm going to dance in the mirror and like strip tease for myself and seduce myself. And then I don't know what'll happen after that, but maybe there might be some sexual things that happen. And all of that feels sexual to me. But what I'm saying is that often when we self-pleasure, we focus on genitals when really we could play with a lot more elements that really satiate us.
I love that. The other part, again, I just want to keep going down this path about what I love about what's coming up for me around the blueprint, the erotic blueprint, that how it's actually very much anchored in your erotic experience, right? Because I think, again, going back to it all being intertwined, like your relational, your needs, your triggers, all these things are on separate tracks, and they might run parallel, but they don't run on the same track. And I think having really digging deep and understanding the erotic energy, your sexual expression, and somewhat aside from your relational dynamics, and understand like what turns me on regardless of who with, how can I turn myself on regardless of anybody else, where I am in a relationship, what kind of a relationship I'm in, with whom I'm relating. But it's just about me soaking in my erotic energy and really understanding what it is, without it getting clouded by other things. And I think one of the things that's really attracting me to this idea of the erotic blueprint.
Yes. Yeah, it gives you all that agency to have the awareness while you are with a bunch of people in the orgy, or while you're by yourself, or while you're with a partner. You get to check in really quickly and go, oh, what are my needs right now? Oh, okay, this, and this. And whether that's influenced by someone else or not, that gets to be the play. The play is when you get to recognize your needs and play with others and see what shows up and be able to communicate that in a way that's simple and easy and fun.
Yeah. I just want to add to that. Where would you think this idea of sort of validation through sex, right? Being validated or seeking validation through sex. How does that fit into the this model of the erotic blueprint? Because it makes me think that this is why I like almost like the purity of the idea of erotic blueprint, that it is about your like erotic power source, and then we kind of have these things that we attach to sexuality, like looking for validation, looking for very specific type of connection, validation of connection, validation of self-worth, validation of our worth within the relationship, right? So we seem to attach these things to our sexuality that what I'm hearing is not necessarily attached naturally. We kind of do it in our minds.
Right. So I'm hearing, as you say that, I'm hearing all of the blueprints are validated by very specific things. So for instance, the energetic blueprint is validated by connection. The sensual blueprint is validated by like beauty. The sexual blueprint is validated by the orgasm and the certainty that shows up in sex. The kinky blueprint is validated by the taboo. And the shapeshifter is validated by like the buffet of it all. The like newness and the discovery. I love that angle.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what they're all seeking in sex, and that's what they're getting from it.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying too, Effy, is about, and Effy and I are going to be collaborating on June 24th to do a training around Know Thyself, which, based on what you're saying, Jessie, and what we know in our work, is the foundation for everything, right? Knowing your needs, knowing your desires, knowing the way that you show up in a relationship, having that basic knowledge and foundation will certainly support everyone in their relationships. But what I also hear you saying then, Effy, is that there is being able, in the same way that we can partial out potentially a relationship need and a sexual need, is understanding why we're showing up to that space. Like, am I looking to be validated as you still care about me? Am I looking to be validated as we are still connected? And I'm trying to leverage sex in order to do that. And that feels like that is layered on top of what we're hearing and what we're learning about in terms of the erotic blueprints around that there are some needs to be validated for connection or for touch or for beauty or for variety, and being able to acknowledge that, but also separate out those pieces. What is a need that is healthy, and maybe what's a need that's rooted in insecurity or an attachment or something else that is disguising itself as a sexual need potentially. Is that tell me, Effy, how you're feeling about that? Does that make sense? Is that where you're at?
It makes sense. I want to kind of take it a step further and say, I'm going to say that needs aren't necessarily healthy or unhealthy by just, there isn't such a thing as a healthy or an unhealthy need, but there is the strategies which we use to meet those needs are healthy or can be classified as unhealthy, or serves or doesn't serve, or adjusted and maladjusted. So I wouldn't necessarily say that there's an unhealthy need. It's just how we go about meeting those needs. And in fact, when you were saying that, what came up for me is that's amazing. If you have an understanding of your erotic energy through these blueprints, and you then have an understanding of, this is how I am, my blueprint suggests that maybe taboo is how I am validated. Then you can look at your life and your choices and say, am I doing anything in my life that is seeking to challenge this idea of taboos? And if I am, are those the right decisions, right? Am I going and doing things that are can be classed as unhealthy? Or I know that about myself now. I know that taboo is something that turns me on. It's a way that I feel validated. Now, what would be a healthy strategy that I can come up with and be creative to meet that need? And then you can also, it might give you an insight into like some of the maladaptive, some of the not necessarily healthy ways of meeting that, right? So maybe, I don't know, with taboo, I can see like, if you're doing things that feel taboo that aren't necessarily like, they also happen to be illegal, for example. I'm not very good at giving an example right now.
there's a like the taboo and not respecting other people's boundaries.
Perfect.
You know, like I've had friends where we're at like a sex coaching convention and we're in the elevator and I have like a choker on and we're on our way to like the sexy party and I'm feeling like, oh God, anyone that enters this space that has not consented, I'm violating their consent. And then my friend next to me being like, who cares about other people's consent? Like we're having a great time. And that's where I think that like the need to like experience a taboo but not checking in with everyone's like doing it in public and the public not agreeing to you walking your person around like a dog with a collar on is a thing.
Right. No, exactly. I love that. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Right. If you consent, we go back. Always go back to the consent. Making sure that everyone's consenting and that you understand what you you understand these drivers and motivations that you might be unconscious to. Right. And I think the more we talk about this, the more I'm realizing, and I also totally like this idea of a blueprint now makes sense, right? Because and then once you understand your blueprint, then it's something to build upon. You know, it's like a map. I do something called 5 rhythms, which is a moving meditation practice. I talk about it.
I love 5 rhythms.
Yeah. I talk about it a lot on the podcast. 5 rhythms has what they call maps. So similar idea. It kind of breaks the 5 rhythms, then create a map and these like 5 pathways that also give you insight into, you know, what turns you on and what shuts you down. What are your blocks? What are your, you know? So it's I like anything like allows for self-reflection and not only self-reflection that I get to know myself, but also reflection that allows me to get to know other people. And I'm like, oh, I show up like this and I can see maybe this person shows up this way, and this way. And then you can be like, how do we collaborate? How do we then make it all happen and it feels delicious and warm and sexy and hot for everyone?
And what I heard you saying too, Jessie, which I love, is not only how do we collaborate in the and I'm using air quotes, in the bedroom, right? And Effy and I try to do a lot of work around pushing back on that language because it's like, it really, a lot of times it's not happening in the bedroom, right? But to that actual end, that really it begins before that. So leveraging the example that I shared around wanting connection, that could have started, you know, hours earlier, or we would have cuddled on the couch, or we would have taken a walk and held hands, some other way of connection, so that when we got to the space where we're going to be sexual, then that need was met. And then I could, you know, explore another level of it because I wasn't trying to meet that need in that space.
Yes.
And so I think that's going to be one of my takeaways from this conversation, is being thoughtful around what are the needs that need to be met to feel good in that space? And can they be met in advance of entering into that space, or as a part of it, an elongated kind of part of it, but not necessarily at the moment of taking clothes off?
Right. And can they just be expressed so that your partner also knows that that's something very important to you? That's a key ingredient to you being fully turned on, fully in the moment, open to receiving and giving. When you understand each other's needs, that's when you're able to go, okay, like I can be here for a little bit longer and like meet you in that way because I know it's really important to you. If I want to have hot, juicy sex,
right, I'm going to do this thing. Right, I'm going to massage your back. I'm going to give you a hand massage, even because I know that's going to be the thing.
Yeah,
right.
The Effy, that part about getting your needs met in like a backwards way is what I was talking about with the toxic relationships. Is I craved like this, like, oh no, like you shouldn't be sleeping with them. They're bad for you. And that meeting a lot of my psychological kink of like, okay, well, I'll just text them and we'll see if they respond. And that intense adrenaline rush that comes from like the catch, the release, the like, this is taboo. Like, oh, now I'm going to hang out with them and we're not going to talk about having sex, but the whole time I'm going to be mentally seducing you. That all was me operating in my blueprint, not knowing what the hell I was doing, but knowing that it was super hot. And so now I work with clients that are like, yeah, I'm attracted to like people that are married, or I'm attracted to the people that are off limits, or they're seeking that taboo factor and the waiting, longing, and anticipation in a way that they're not conscious about it.
Yeah.
So we work together to make sure that they're getting those needs met. before.
Right. And the need is healthy, but the strategy is not.
Right.
There's a better strategy to meet that need. That makes a lot of sense. So let me go back to the question, because we started talking about what to do with the mismatch. I'm interested in, you talked about different phases of relationships. When we get past the NRE phase, which at some point the three of us are going to work together to create the potion so that phase never has to end.
Okay.
I'm committed to that. But right now, until that moment comes, when that phase ends, are there strategies around how to spice more things up, or how to then create more pleasure-rooted experiences with a partner after NRE?
Of course. There are so many practices. One of the practices that I really like is, which I don't mean to like take away all the spice and sizzle of this topic, but like planning time together. Prioritizing the time. Prioritizing pleasure is huge, like especially for all the overachievers. Prioritizing time together is the biggest part, and then you get to add to all of that. So when you say, like, for instance, in my calendar, every Monday is a day where I am supposed to be like leaning into pleasure throughout the day. And then I have a very specific window of time, like from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., where I'm just supposed to surrender to whatever shows up in the moment that looks like pleasure, whatever that is. If that's soaking my feet in hot water, if that's like cleaning my house so that I feel more like relaxed in my house, if that's taking a shower, it can be anything, whatever shows up. So I think adding these little bits of like having the spontaneity window in there of there's no expectations, we're just showing up. But you can also add, one of my favorite little hacks is an adventure date. So an adventure date has 3 different components to it. It has mystery, it has novelty or naughtiness, and it has obstacle. So the mystery would be like, hey, babe, I'm gonna, this Monday night, like, I know that we have the spontaneity window. Like, don't worry, I have everything covered. You just need to show up hungry and like relaxed. So if you hear that, you get to go, oh shit, I need to be relaxed. Okay, what do I need to do to be relaxed in order to show up for this? The obstacle part is like, how can you make this less how can you draw out the satisfaction and create a little bit of a challenge? So I've done that with like giving people little love letters, or for people in quarantine, if you're like, we have nowhere to go, I put a blindfold on them. And I'll say like, okay, I'm going to lead you to this room. And that obstacle creates the like, whoa, what's happening? This is fun. This is different. This is awesome. And then the newness or the naughtiness can be whatever you want to add in there. Anything that you've been like, we've wanted to try this for a long time, or you know how we've been talking about giving each other like hot oil massages for a while, or we've been wanting to try bondage. Like those are the things that you can bring into the newness. And those 3 elements are what we seek in NRE. It's when we're on first dates, when the adrenaline is high, and then when the oxytocin and the dopamine kick in, and there's uncertainty going on, that's fulfilled by mystery, obstacle, and novelty or naughtiness. So practicing that in long-term relationships is super helpful, and like regularly. Often, at least once a month, if not twice a month, where people are alternating giving.
I love that.
I'm going to try it this week.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to do it. I'll report back.
I harp on about date nights, but just giving that kind of like, here's the thing. I do think that a big part of maintaining a healthy, thriving relationship is creativity. Like I talk about it all the time, like creating, problem solving, being creative, which to some people it comes more naturally, and for other people it's not as easy, and it doesn't come as naturally. And a lot of what we do here at Curious Fox is the inspiration and permission part of it. The inspiration part of it is to give people inspiration to be creative, to come up with their own ways of really figuring these things out. Because if we've done we've just done with Stella Harris, we've done a masturbation workshop, right? So it's like, okay, now the idea is that, do you want to like take this evening and do mutual masturbation, right? This is your inspiration. We just given you inspiration and information, and by the way, we just sat through the whole thing as a community, so permission. So please, like, take the time now, and take this evening. You're here anyway. You're all primed, and then just getting get involved with some mutual masturbation, right? So it's this is the idea, and date nights is another one of those. Like, you have to have date nights. Well, I tell these people all the time, put it in your calendar, like stick to it, like you stick to your kid's soccer practice, right? You have to stick to this time. And what you've just said, the sort of the structure of what you can do with that date night, I think is so valuable.
Absolutely.
It's so much better than going to like the Italian restaurant that you always go to and like,
and you always
eating
eat too many carbs on
Yeah, and then you feel bloated and who wants to have sex at that point. We did a podcast episode and had a workshop with Steve Dean, who is an expert on dating. And one of the things that he did through the experience, through the workshop, which was great, was helping people. First, he asked people to think about ways in which they experience self-care. And so people talked about cooking delicious meals for themselves, or engaging in positive self-talk, or reading really excellent books and things like that. And he said, fantastic. And they made these whole lists about how people take care of themselves. And he said, now turn those things into dates. How would you take the ways in which you give yourself pleasure and create a date experience? He's like, take 3 of those things and put them together, and now you've created a date experience for someone else. And so what I hear is, let's first focus on what it is that we want to make sure that we're meeting our needs. Let's use that information to then understand our partners and what they need, and to collaborate on an evening around that. And then let's create a little bit of anticipation and excitement and naughtiness and some fun, and replicate some of that NRE. Yeah. You've talked a little bit about some of the work that you've done with clients. I wonder if you can share out kind of some of, maybe a before and after, or an experience that you had with somebody that you really helped them step into their sexual empowerment, and you saw that reflected in their life.
Yeah, thank you. I have one really amazing client that has given me permission to share this. So there's that consent. This person was freshly out of a divorce, and that divorce was not the healthiest. And they had been sexless for over 17 years. And she had been having sex with herself, but never said anything to her partner. And so from emerging into this new singlehood, she was terrified. She was like, I don't know how to express to people what it is that I want. I don't know how to date people. Like, how terrifying does that sound? I'm scared that people are going to reject me for what it is that I want. So we worked together, and it was incredible. I did one session. I usually work with people over the span of like 4 to 6 months, because I really want to get you to your goals and have that embodiment last. So one of the sessions that we did is a discovery session where I take over 40 sensations that are all categorized into the different blueprints, and I map out where the highest arousal is on your body. And part of her highest arousal was on her kneecaps. And I took a metal spoon that was warm and traced her kneecaps. And the first reaction was, I said, okay, scale of 1 to 5, how pleasurable is this? Because I'm using like effective communication and like getting the feedback. And she goes, oh, it's a 4. It's a 4.5. A 4.5 is like almost to orgasm. And my immediate reaction is like, because I'm the sex nerd, I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And her immediate reaction is, how weird am I? Her immediate reaction is like, whoa, what is wrong with me? So in that moment, I get to show up and go, or like, I get to change the story in the script. Like, how amazing is it that you get to be dating someone, and when you like them and you feel safe with them and you're out to dinner, like you get to go, hey, by the way, so my kneecaps are this special place.
Yeah, it's like a superpower.
Anyone about? Yeah, this is my superpower. I love tapping into and finding other people's erotic superpowers, because sometimes we don't know that our ankles, our knees, the space. Like, that person also preferred lots of space, like 16 feet of space to begin like erotic approach. And so knowing these things, knowing that that's just how I'm wired, and that's just how she's wired, allowed her to really own that. She also had many desires to be in multiple relationships. And she was like, who am I to be in multiple relationships with many different partners? And so being able to see her now, where she has, I think, over 3 partners who are all satisfying her in the kinkiest of ways, in the sexiest of ways, like showing up for her and allowing her to have these experiences where she's talking about what it is that she wants firsthand. She's able to not have any shame about it. She's owning it. And therefore, she's experiencing erotic breakthrough after erotic breakthrough because she's owning her pleasure. And these people are saying, fuck yes. Like, you're talking to me about it up front and I'm down. Let's do this. So hearing her stories has been like my favorite testimonial part because she's frolicking now, where before she was completely scared.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, you were able to transform shame into curiosity as opposed to really seeing yourself. Yeah, good for you. Love that story.
So fun.
And I think also just you sharing the people that she's playing with, their response is this like positive, like thank you for telling me.
Yes.
So I think it's also important. I think what gets in the way sometimes is that you're more worried about what reaction are you going to get. You know, when I start playing with somebody for sort of early on, I, once we sort of cuddle and spend some time like skin on skin, I ask them, I say, would you like me to tell you a little bit about my body? And
I love that.
And you're just like, oh, and they, depending, who they are and what kind of background they come in, if they're coming from, a sex positive community, they're like, yes, please, tell me all. And then if they're not, there's definitely a pause of like, oh, like what's about to come? What am I getting myself into? Or they might not be used to talking about it. Not be comfortable by just like about the topic. By the time I'm done, ubiquitously I get a thank you. It's always like thank you so much. This is amazing. And it's I've never had anybody like get up and leave. So if you can get that, I mean, I just personal experience, if you can get that, if you're able to explain your desire and make requests, talk about your needs and give people tips and clues and instructions on how to meet those needs, you're there.
They're happy about it.
Yeah.
That is the part that I hear most people reach out to me is they go, oh God, I what do I need? I have no idea. I have no idea what I want. If you were to ask someone, tell me about what your body likes, and they completely freeze up because they don't know, that's when I would just encourage you to reach out for support. There are so many people that can help you. I would love to help anyone in that position because it's just an education. It's just a discovery process. And you're not alone in that. I hear so many people that don't know how to name their desires or what it is that they like. Or you could be like me, where you're like, this is a script of what my desire is. And actually, it's just making you completely unorgasmic because you're following something that's not true.
Absolutely.
And we spend years and thousands of dollars learning about other subjects, learning about other people, learning about other and really spend very little time learning about ourselves.
For sure.
And really
especially a pleasure.
Yeah.
Not just about
and spend again years and thousands of dollars trying to seek out happiness and joy and pleasure without necessarily taking that time to do that work on ourselves. And so again, on June 24th, Effy and I are going to be tapping into Know Thyself, and we're going to be doing that work with you on June 10th around the blueprint. Really, it's like the most annoying answer when people are like, well, what do we do first? And you're like, spend time with yourself and get to know yourself. You're like, no, I want to skip that part and just get to but it really does start there. It really does start there.
Know thyself. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you want to learn more about the Erotic Blueprint and how to gain a deeper understanding into your pleasure, do join us on Wednesday, June 10th, where Jessie will be joining us at the virtual Curiosity Salon. She'll be teaching you all about your own erotic blueprints needs and desires, as well as any lovers you'll encounter. Whether you're single or you're single and craving satisfaction, together and feeling alone or unfed, or hot and taking it to the next level, this workshop is sure to teach you something orgasmic. Erotic Blueprints may be the foundation to greater understanding, therefore greater sexual satisfaction, and eventually pleasure mastery.
And there's going to be a live demo in that class where I'm taking another person, teaching you everything that I just shared, and showing you how to read their arousal in their body. So I basically get this person turned on to an orgasmic state.
Oh my God.
The tools that I give you. It's super duper fun. Very juicy.
Live demos.
Live demos.
I wish you could see Effy right now. I wish the world could see how excited. Yes, live demos. Yes.
I mean, my roommate that is in quarantine with me, who is single, is like, "Fuck yes for live demos," because it's the main touch that she's getting. So it's so fun.
I can't wait. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. And if you cannot wait, just like we are, tickets are available on our Facebook page, also in our Instagram bio, also on our website by searching We Are Curious Foxes, and it's wearecuriousfoxes.com, our website. And you can find tickets for Jessie's workshop and many others coming up over the next few weeks. We are taking over Wednesdays. We are redefining Hump Day, and we are encouraging you and providing you programming for inspiration and permission to really take that day to learn, to be inspired, to play, to get in touch with yourself, to connect with your partner or partners. Reclaim Hump Days. Come and learn with us. Come and connect with us. Come and play with us.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about date nights, right? Make Wednesday night date night for yourself or for you and your partner or partners. Show up on Wednesday. You know that something amazing is going to happen. We're going to have a workshop on erotic blueprints. We're going to have stuff on attachment styles. We're going to have stuff on masturbation. We're going to have stuff on knowing yourself. We're going to have something really fun and engaging and interesting that you will have implementable takeaways. You will walk away from that session. You will close your Zoom and close your computer and be able to do something different as a result of it. Mm-hmm. And so if you can join us on June 10th, be sure to get tickets. If you can't join us, or if you are listening in the future, if you are listening on June 11th to this podcast episode and are distraught because you have missed this, there is no worry, because you can find us on Patreon. And if you are a patron of ours, and anywhere from $5 to $12 a month, if you contribute and support this community, you will get access to all of the workshops that we have facilitated, both live and virtual. We have videos that are all there that are accessible to our patrons. So you can watch it if you've missed it. And you have the ability to get free tickets for yourself and for guests to future events. You can do Ask Me Anything sessions with Effy, where you get to tap into her relationship expertise, coaching skill set. And there are a lot of other goodies and exclusive events for patrons. So go on to Patreon. You can find it there at We Are Curious Foxes. You can find us on social media and Instagram and Facebook at We Are Curious Foxes. If you want to learn more about Jessie Fresh, you can visit her at her website at jessiefresh.com or follow her at Instagram at jessiefreshthecoach. We talked about Patreon. The other way in which you can support this community is by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. It does make a difference. Our goal, as Effy said, is to hashtag change the noise and to really create spaces places where you can hear, where you can watch, where you can attend, where you can read, so that all of these things that have created shame, that hold us back from our deep pleasure, that we can replace those stories with stories of inspiration and possibility of what else is actually out there and lean into our curiosity. And so please like and share and review the podcast. If you have any questions that you would like us to explore or themes for the podcast, you can email us at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com, or you can leave us a voice message and we can play your question or your story on the air and address it at 201-870-0063. And so we'll make sure to include all of this information in the show notes. And we hope that you get to join us on June 10th for more of Jessie, more of the blueprints, and more of pleasure, just more of more.
Thank you so much, Jessie, for joining us, sharing your wisdom, sharing your thoughts. We can't wait till Wednesday. And until the next episode, stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.